The message I'm going to deliver today is going to be extremely useful to most of my subscribers, but highly controversial. I'm sure that there will be many in the viewing audience who will disagree with what I have to say. That's okay. Disagreement can be constructive when the resulting conversations that result are civil and well-intentioned. There are some, I'm sure, who will feel it necessary to leave obnoxious or abusive comments. That's a shame, but it's not going to deter me from trying to continue to help and provide guidance to those who would like to become better gold and silver investors. My mission here is to share my experiences and understanding of the gold and silver market so that new gold and silver investors can achieve long-term success and short-term peace of mind. There's a belief out there that's very pervasive in the gold and silver community. It's a mindset and a belief that is extremely damaging to small gold and silver investors, both old and new. Human nature always seeks to explain away misfortune and lack of success by looking to external causes. The end result is always the same. It breeds a victim mentality. Rather than looking for ways to succeed, the mind locks down and focuses on all of the reasons why success is not possible. It makes success a virtual impossibility, not because of external influences blamed, but because of the inaction resulting from a feeling of helplessness. In other words, it's not quote unquote them hurting you as much as it is you yourself preventing your own success. So what is this belief that I speak of in the metals community that is so damaging? The belief is in a grand conspiracy to suppress the price of precious metals. Now, I'm not saying that manipulation does not occur. It does. It really does. I have no doubt about that. But the manipulation is as much on the upside as it is on the downside. And if you feel that you are falling victim to it, then your strategy is just wrong and should be changed. But the long-term suppression in metals prices has another cause that I will discuss. It's a natural occurrence resulting from the actions of a bunch of self-interested actors. Metals prices are lower than they otherwise would be if these actors weren't present, but the price-depressing effect of their activities is just a result of how they make their money, not as a result of them conspiring to hold down metals prices. I will discuss why metals prices are depressed as a result of the paper market. So in the end, what I hope to provide you in this video is knowledge of how the various actors in the precious metals market make their money. Each plays by a specific set of rules and has their own goal. Knowing the rules they play by will help you do well in this game. Not knowing the rules will mean that they will be making their money from you. So let's discuss the rules of the game that you have chosen to play and the objectives of your opponents so that you can become a better player and ultimately win. We'll start with the speculators. What function do they serve, and how do they make their money in this game? Quite simply, this group is in the game to make dollar profits from short-term price movements. And by short-term, I generally mean a year or less. Because they're only interested in paper profits, they don't bother with real gold or silver. They play in the paper securities game. They buy and sell futures and options. They don't care if the price movement is up or down, as long as it moves big, moves quickly, and moves in their favor. The big speculators know how to make the market move in the direction that they want it to go. They take advantage of other traders' stop losses and take advantage of key price points to trigger margin calls. You see, they know ahead of time when a breach in a particular price level will create a frenzy of panic buying or panic selling. So they tend to enter large paper orders during a very thinly traded period of market activity. They trigger the stops and margin calls, let the panicky traders do the rest of the work in moving the price for them, and then they close out their position and start the process all over again. Is this manipulation? Absolutely. Is it legal? Well, that's debatable. Does it happen? Yes. So what can you do about it other than complaining and feeling angry about it? Well, that's easy. Notice that I said that the speculator acts on short-term price swings and that the speculator makes money on upswings as well as downswings. That means that long-term the impact of the speculator is zero. That's right. Beyond a year or two, the speculator has no influence on market movements. So if you are oriented long term, this manipulation will not hurt you. Quite the contrary. If you watch for these movements, then you can take advantage of price drops to pick up real metal at attractive prices. If you want to be hurt by the manipulators, then all you have to do is be short-term oriented. Buy paper and buy it on margin. Use technical analysis. Set stop-loss orders. Do this and the big speculators will gladly take your money from you. Don't play their game. You'll lose, and you'll just end up being angry. But the speculator does serve a useful function, believe it or not. There are those who actually do use paper contracts as part of their businesses. There are businesses who actually buy and sell real metal and want to execute contracts based upon known prices of the metals. They will use futures contracts to lock in a price for the metal at which they can make a paper profit. The speculator takes the opposite side of the trade much of the time. So the group of speculators can be thought of as providers of price insurance for the users of the metals. Take for example a mining business that needs to pay for the development of a new mine right now, but won't be pulling out metal for many years. If the mine borrows to develop the mine and then the price of the metals collapses, then the mining company will experience a huge loss. On the other hand, if the mine sells forward its production at a pre-negotiated price, then the mining company can lock in its profits now and guarantee profitability upon success of the project. It will be the speculator on the other side of the futures contract who will lose big if the price of the metals drops. So let's talk a little bit about the mining companies. They are also players in this great game that we're in. Put yourself in the place of the mining company executive. The CEO is in the position to make paper profits for shareholders. There are very few mining companies who pay their investors in metal. Maybe someday that will come in vogue, but for now it's paper profits that are the focus. I already discussed forward sales. So the mines sell long futures contracts. The effect of this practice is to create paper surrogates for future physical gold and silver. So long as the cost of operation is less than what they can obtain through the sale of futures contracts, and the profit margin is sufficient, the company will sell gold and silver futures. This increases the total apparent supply of gold and silver. Think about it this way. The gold mining industry only produces enough gold and silver to increase the above-ground physical stock by 1.2% per year for gold and 3 to 5% per year for silver. Ordinarily, such a small rate of production would be inconsequential to the price of the metal itself. The price would be dictated by the holders of the above-ground stock, which would constitute the majority of what would be available for sale. But now, the mining industry sells forward, say, 10 years worth of future supply. So now, there are paper contracts out there that represent metal itself that is the equivalent of 10 to 20% of the above-ground gold stock and 30 to 50% of the above-ground silver stock. If the purchasers of the metal are willing to accept the paper contract for future supply instead of the real metal in the present, then the effective supply of gold and silver is much higher than it otherwise would be. The effect? It depresses the price. It's not a conspiracy. It's just how the mining business works. The other thing to note is that the mine wants to maximize revenue and profit. They are in the business to bring the gold and silver out of the ground, not sit on it. So they will produce so long as they can make a paper profit. Thus, even if the large holders of above-ground gold and silver hoards value their metal very highly, the mine will sell its metal at a low price provided the dollar profit margins are acceptable to shareholders. Does this suppress the price? Absolutely. But remember, the shareholders are looking for dollar profits, not trying to maximize the value of the gold in the ground or the silver in the ground that they hold title to. To make matters worse, the CEOs of these companies will generally try to produce the highest grade deposits preferentially over lower grade deposits to help contain costs. This further holds down the price of the metals, at least in the near term. So how do you avoid the game the miner is playing from affecting you? Simple. Hold the real metal for a long period of time. Don't hold gold and silver mining shares in the hopes that you'll see price rises that are much larger than what will be seen in the physical metal. Can it happen? Sure. Can you guarantee it? No. I think you'll find that mines are valued based upon the paper profits that they generate, not based upon the gold and silver that are in the ground. The practice of high grading virtually guarantees that the physical gold and silver that you are holding now will be worth more than mining shares in the future as costs skyrocket due to declining ore grades and increasing energy costs. Time to talk about the quote-unquote evil bullion banks and their clients. These are the organizations who are often associated with the speculators and accused of naked short selling of metal. Sure, there are speculative activities that are carried out by the trading desks of the bullion banks, but we've already talked about the effect of speculation and how to avoid being taken advantage of by the practices of the short-term price manipulators. So let's talk about the core business of the bullion bank and how they make their money in this game. Recall that prior to the early 20th century, banks would keep on deposit gold and or silver and would loan out a portion of it. The gold rarely moved, but the practice of fractional reserve banking resulted in a larger amount of paper representing gold and silver circulating than there was gold and silver in physical form. Thus, while the supply of real gold and silver remained relatively stagnant, the paper representations of them could expand and contract greatly, which caused boom and bust cycles. In general, though, the phantom money supply increased, which had a depressing effect on the value of gold and silver. But so long as people were willing to accept the paper instead of the physical, the effect was to cause an undervaluation in gold and silver. Until, of course, the confidence of the paper holders was lost, and they tried to redeem their claims. In this situation, the value of the physical gold and silver that could be obtained increased a great deal, and the banks closed their doors. Think of the bullion bank as being the same as the old banks before the early 20th century. Instead of acting like the modern banks we think of today that simply deal in Federal Reserve notes, these banks keep on deposit real physical bullion, which can be lent out for a profit. And I've dealt with this subject in other videos. The bullion bank acts as the market maker between the owners of the gold and silver, who want to lend it, and the users of gold and silver, who want to borrow it. Who would want to borrow gold and silver? Hint: it's the mining companies who want to sell their production forward. So how does this work? Well, it comes down to the curve of future prices for metal at various maturities. The owner of the metal will sell spot gold for cash, which then gets invested in a futures contract for the return of the metal at a future time. A certain amount of leverage is generally used so the cash is available to invest in paper debt instruments to provide a yield for the metal owner. The bullion bank makes money on the spread, which is their fee for storing the metal and making the market. So the bank makes a cash flow from the spread. The client earns a yield on their holdings. Both end up with a cash flow from the operation. And who pays for this? Generally, it's the party who wants to borrow the metal and sell it forward. It's also paid by those who buy future mine supply so as not to move the metals market with oversized purchases of the real metal. Yes, the future paper can be used to hide purchases of physical, but that is a topic that's too deep to cover here, and I've explained it many times in my other videos. And the cost is also borne by those who decide that they would rather invest in paper futures rather than hold the real metal. They're the ones that are paying the spread. So the bullion banks and their clients, by mobilizing gold and silver, are doing so on leverage. They're very similar to the fractional reserve banks of old. The net effect of their operations is to create a supply of paper gold and silver equivalents that is much greater than the actual amount of underlying physical gold and silver. Does this depress the price? Absolutely. The amount of paper contracts representing gold and silver is currently orders of magnitude greater than the amount of real physical metal. But so long as investors who claim to want to own gold and silver are willing to settle for paper representations of the metal, it will take real demand away from the physical. Thus, if confidence is lost and those holding the paper scramble to obtain real physical, then the value of the physical metal will adjust upwards by orders of magnitude. But I just got sidetracked. We're talking about manipulation, aren't we? Does the operation of the bullion bank and its clients make sense to you? Well, it does to me. Who wouldn't want to try to earn a yield on their wealth? Does it suppress the price of the metals? Yep. Is it a grand conspiracy of manipulation? No. It's the natural action of a bunch of independent, self-interested actors who are playing a game to profit. And what they are doing is perfectly legal. How can you avoid being damaged by their actions? Well, it's easy. The expansion of paper, gold, and silver has already hit a peak. How do I know this? There's no yield available to these players anymore. The forward rates on futures are near zero, and so there's no profit to being a market maker anymore. That's why some of the bullion banks are winding down their operations. There's also no yield on paper debt that's sufficient to entice gold and silver holders of size to lend. So all you need to do? Just hold the physical and wait. Now let's talk about the central banks. Recall that over the past couple of decades, there have been many bold and well-publicized announcements of central bank gold sales. The reason for these announcements was simply to make gold seem less of a desirable place to be than paper. Many times the threats had the desired impact of reducing prices and reducing them very quickly. And the speculators loved this, by the way. But how often were the central bank sales actually executed where gold found its way into private hands? I know of only a handful of gold sales which were threatened and actually completed, and of those, I know only of transactions where gold moved from one sovereign to another. I know of none where sales were open to the bidding process where private individuals could buy what was offered. Think about it. If you can come up with an example, I'd be very interested to hear about it. What the central banks have done that I'm aware of is backstop the bullion banks. They know that there are some very powerful interests, namely key OPEC countries, who will only support the petrodollar system if they know that they can obtain real physical gold. And they need to obtain real physical gold quietly, as in using the futures market, so as not to adversely impact the price. So the mechanism of gold loans had to be maintained over the past 30 years. It had to function uninterrupted. The central bank gold was leased out to ensure that delivery could always be made. And yes, Germany was a part of this. Here's where one might be able to legitimately call foul. While I think about threats of sales that were done deliberately to drop the price, I don't think that the intention of the gold leasing was deliberately to reduce the price. The price reduction was brought about by the rest of the actors in this system. It was the practice of central bank gold leasing that kept it going, and kept it going reliably, and thus kept the petrodollar system working much longer than it otherwise would have. It's had the benefit of keeping the oil flowing, so it's not altogether a bad thing. It's just the central banks helping make sure that the gold goes where it needs to go. So we've discussed 4 big-time opponents of yours, but we haven't yet discussed your biggest opponent in this game. And that opponent is you. That's right. You are your own worst enemy in this game. Because you play this game without knowing the rules and without knowing your opponents. How can anyone expect to win under such circumstances? Maybe you started buying gold and silver in 2011 simply because you noticed that the price had gone up for 10 years. And now that the price is much lower, you feel that you've been taken advantage of. The videos that are out there that discuss grand conspiracies and manipulation are certainly enticing. They present you with an alternative to the painful possibility that you simply bought at the wrong time. But consider what this does to you. It takes away your power. It takes away your hope. It takes away your motivation to become better at this game. You have a chance to know the reasons why gold and silver are inexpensive right now, to know why you should be accumulating them long term. You have the chance to win this game long term. You see, if you understand the actions of most of these opponents, you will know that they've already gotten everything that they can out of this game. Their strategies, which have depressed the price of the metals, not through conspiracy, but merely through self-interested action, have run their course. Speculation and manipulation only impacts the short term. The mines have already sold forward production, and their ore grades are in decline. The gold and silver loan game is now without incentive for the holders of the real metal to participate. Central banks are now on average accumulating gold, not selling it. And so, it is in your best interest to lose your focus on grand conspiracy theories. Study the real players in this game. Understand why their natural actions have depressed the price of the metals. Realize that all of these effects are now going into reverse. And buy real metal long term.